addition to offering every core business course in a lecture capture video streaming format, we also offer extensive offerings in a variety of courses online, as well as an online MBA program and a variety of online master's programs. So you can't come to FAU and major in business and not take an online course. That's just part of our culture. We have it's expected that you will take some of your courses online, which then presents us with one of the biggest challenges that we face at our college is how to proctor 26,000 exams each semester in a way that's cost-effective, that's convenient for students, and as well as the most important part, to protect academic integrity. Okay? So our experience with online exams has evolved over the last 6 years. Initially, when we started, we're always looking at new technologies, and then we're discovering that students are coming up with ways to overcome those technologies. And so when we started this process, we really focused on creating deterrence. Okay, so what we wanted to do was really not focus too much on the proctoring, but just create ways to make it more difficult to cheat. So our online exams, we would use very large test banks, large pools of questions. We would randomize the questions. We would prevent backtracking, maybe use a lockdown browser. So in addition, we also implemented a campaign to try to promote the virtues of honest behavior. Just try to make it so that students understand that they're here in college. They should be working hard and earning their degrees as honestly as possible. But unfortunately, what we discovered is that wasn't quite enough. It wasn't as effective as what we hoped, and that we were still seeing quite a number of instances of dishonest behavior. And so that really led us to rethink our strategy and come up with new ways to approach it. So what we do is what we try to come across is how to address the 4 key issues with online exams. And one of the first problems is preventing group collaboration, because when you have an unproctored exam, there's nothing to prevent groups of students to working together, sharing answers with one another. And so that's always something that we needed to address. And secondly, the second problem had to do with information sharing. So this is the idea that one student among a group would take the exam first within the window, and then sometimes they would take pictures of all the questions during the exam and then share it with their friends afterwards, and then they would subsequently take the exam after within the same window. So those were 2 important issues we had to address. Third, which really created some problems for us, was professional test takers. So these are students or maybe even non-students that were offering their services, $150 or $200 for a guaranteed A. And what we found out that for the best test takers, the demand for their services were so great that they couldn't even fit all of their customers within the window of the test time period. So it created a problem even for the students who were trying to seek out these services. And so we wanted to shut this down completely. So we wanted to address the professional test taker problem. And of course, a fourth issue is the fact that students are able to search for answers online when the exam is not proctored. And regardless of the textbook that you use, it's more likely than not that the test bank of most textbooks are going to be available online in some form. Okay? And it might not always be students posting questions and answers online, but sometimes it may be very an inadvertent action done by the instructor. Okay? So for example, how many of you have perhaps posted a practice exam with answers online? Maybe for your students to practice, and maybe you have used test bank questions. Well, what you may not realize is when you post those questions and answers online, they become searchable very often by other students at other universities who are taking the real exam, not your practice exam. So these are some of the issues that we really had to address in this case. And just to show you how easy it is for students to access test bank questions online, I have a brief example here. So if you're taking the exam online, what you can do is you can highlight, copy, and paste the question, right-click your mouse, which takes you directly to Google, and it opens up the result right there on the top of the Google search. Okay? And if that doesn't give you the answer right on the top of the Google page, it will, with one more click, it would actually show you the source where you can actually find the answer. Okay, so what's interesting here is that the time it takes to search for
an answer online, it's often, sometimes even faster than it is to actually read the question. I mean, I can, as you saw in that demo, I can copy and paste, search for an answer, and the answer appears within 15 to 20 seconds. Sometimes when it takes you to actually read the question, think about an answer, it would actually take longer. So just the strategy of reducing the time for students to search for answers might not be effective. Okay? And the source of many of these so-called online help guides on the internet are often, for example, Course Hero, there's Quizlet, there's Study Blue. And so this is just some of the examples of what you might see in a Google search. You see some of these same services, and they're appearing a lot of these test bank questions. And just to give you another example, in Study Blue, what I did was I searched for a very popular textbook that's out there. And for one book alone, there were 176 test bank files. Not necessarily test bank files, but final exam files and variety of files that were posted by previous students. And within these files is essentially containing the vast majority of the test bank questions. So it really is a problem that we have to address. Okay. So what is the solution to this issue? Is obviously is proctoring. Okay, and how do we go about it? Well, the most common methods of proctoring include using the testing centers, having your students all come to campus at once to take exams together, or to use webcams. Okay, and that's going to be the primary focus of the rest of my talk, is the use of webcams in proctoring remotely. So there's live remote proctoring as well as on-demand proctoring. Okay, but even using these resources, I mean, at FAU we require the use of webcams for all of our exams, but even so, students are always coming up with new ways to get around these new technologies, even webcams. So ever realize that how well your students are, or how skilled your students are taking selfies? Well, think about that action. When a student takes a selfie, they're trying to get a good picture without their arm appearing in the picture. Or imagine if they take that skill set and they apply it to exam taking. So what we found is that students are very skilled at overcoming the webcam by holding devices of some sort behind the webcam, and they're searching for answers, and they're able to deceive, in many cases, the webcam that's capturing them taking the exam. Okay? So again, while we come up with all these mechanisms to detect cheating, what we also must be mindful about is how intrusive are we going to become in our detection methods? Okay? In other words, if we require the use of a webcam, does that violate a student's privacy? Okay? And especially when many times a webcam service will allow you as an instructor to see firsthand the student's testing environment, which sometimes will be the student's bedroom. Okay? And that's kind of creepy. And so essentially it's a balance between the integrity of the exam versus the privacy of the student. And as often as I implore my students to wear, for example, just basic clothing during the online exams, some of my students are just much more comfortable in not wearing clothing. So but that's another issue. So essentially, what I like to do now is talk about the different mechanisms that we have used at FAU for proctoring. And I'm going to go through each one and talk about the pros and cons. So first, our first strategy when we started implementing proctoring was to use our testing center. Okay? In this case, we would have students, even though it's an online course, we would have students schedule an appointment at the testing center, and they would come in within the days that the testing center is open for the exam, and take the exam on usually on Blackboard. Okay, so in this case, there are many benefits and costs for doing so. The benefits is that students it is a very convenient service. Students can schedule it at at a time convenient for them, and it's also has an ability for students who are living out of town to use associated testing centers, external testing centers that we have partnerships with. And this is all throughout the world. Okay? There's various sites around the world that students can pay a little bit extra if they don't live in the area. So the idea of testing centers is quite effective at preventing, obviously, group collaboration. And for the most part, it's a smooth process because most of the technical issues that might occur with the testing centers is handled by the testing staff. Okay, so overall, it's a good way to, if you're able to have the resources to do that, the testing center is already available, it's a good method. Okay, but the downsides, and there are quite a few, is that you do still have to require your students to come to campus, and for some students that's just not very convenient. But more so for students who do not live in the area, the cost of using an external testing center can be quite expensive. We've seen testing centers charge between $50 up to $300 in some places for a student to come in and take an exam. And in addition, some testing centers that are external may not have the right software that your students need. So, for example, if you're teaching a econometrics class or any other class that requires a specific software, there might be problems there as well. Okay? But the main reason that we stopped using our testing center was the sheer numbers of students we had. Okay, so even if we tried to schedule every one of our students within the available slots of the testing center, some students will have to come to campus, for example, Friday night at 9 o'clock. Okay, they're not going to have convenient times for all of our students, just given our numbers. And then that brings up other concerns about students coming to campus when it's completely empty, and that's maybe not safe as they're walking to and from their car. And it brought other issues that we didn't want to have to resolve. So what we did was then we thought about, okay, how about having all of our students come to campus and trying to utilize our auditorium space when they're not being used? Well, that had the benefit of not only resolving the group collaboration and also preventing information sharing, but then the issue came with is as our online enrollment grew, we simply ran out of space. Okay, so bringing your students on campus to take exams together will be convenient if you have a relatively small class and space to do so. But again, it's very difficult when you have the super large sections like we do. And again, the whole idea of offering online courses is many of your students are actually not able to come to campus. They may have young children. They have to stay at home. They may be in the military where they're stationed abroad. They may be on a study abroad program, but they still need to take a course or two on the home campus online. So for all those reasons, it's very difficult to then require an in-person exam on campus. So this led us to really about 3 or 4 years ago using webcams as our method of remote proctoring. And first we explored live proctoring, live online proctoring, which the most popular company for that is ProctorU. But there also is a company, a newer company called Examity that has an option to do the same thing. And there's others that offer the similar services. Now, the benefit of using live online proctoring is that students really can take the exam anywhere in the world. They just have to schedule a time slot, and they can take it anywhere in the world. And anytime there's any issues with the exam, there's a live person in the proctoring company able to help resolve the situation pretty quickly. Okay, so that's really it's a very good service. But what our main concern with using this service was really the cost. What we found is that even with some bulk discounts, the pricing of a live exam can range all the way up to $40 for an exam, especially if it's a longer exam. And again, with 26,000 students each semester, we don't have $1 million to just spend on proctoring each semester. Okay? In addition, if a student experiences a technical problem during exam, or if the computer freezes or shuts down, they sometimes will then need to, if they can't get back on quickly, they will have to reschedule an appointment, and that sometimes causes an inconvenience. So that brings us to remote on-demand. Okay? And this is what we have been using for the last 2 to 3 years. And with remote on-demand proctoring, students are taking their exams at their preferred time within the exam window, and they are using their webcam to record all of their tests. Okay? Their screen is captured as well as the video of them taking the exam. And then afterwards, the exam and all the footage is uploaded to the company, in which they audit each exam, either by a human or a computer, depending on the service that you purchase. So for example, Proctor Free is a very inexpensive service that they use a computer to analyze each exam. But we use Software Secure, which is a human auditor, to look at each exam. And then there's Examity that offers that service too, as well as Respondus Monitor. And again, many other services are offering these similar services. The key benefit of using on-demand remote proctoring is the cost. It ranges from $8 to $15 as opposed to the live proctoring, which could be at least double that cost. Okay? And again, this allows students to take the exam at their preferred time. And from the instructor's perspective, it allows you, as the instructor, to make the final call to determine if any violations have taken place. Okay? So for example, once all the exams are uploaded to the company, they will send you a list of infractions. The red flags means it's a clear infraction, it's some sort of cheating that went on, or yellow infractions may be a simple rules violation. Okay? Maybe they were listening to music, maybe they were wearing a hat. But in any case, you get a very nice report with all these yellow and red flags, and it's up to you to view the footage and determine if it was in fact an infraction and whether or not you're going to implement a penalty. Okay? The downsides of on-demand remote proctoring is one that really deals with the issue of privacy, because unlike live proctoring, where the footage is generally deleted as soon as the exam is over, for remote on-demand, the footage remains available for you to access usually until the end of the semester. So there is some concern that we have discussed about the fact that instructors now have access to view the students' testing environment. Okay. But what we found is that overall, what we've used in the past few years is Software Secure, that the benefits have outweighed the cost. What we found is that the level of cheating has dramatically fallen. And for the most part, students are accustomed to having the webcam turn on and taking the exam. Okay? There will always be some technical problems, and that's one of the frustrations with using any of these systems, is that a small percentage, maybe 2 to 5% of students, may experience a glitch when they're downloading the software or when they're trying to set up the initial authentication process. And that does require your time as an instructor to resolve or at least forward the issue onto tech support. Okay? And this is what I found is especially the case when students are using older computers that might not be able to download the newest platform, or sometimes it's when students have the newest platform. Okay? I just received a note last week that the new Mac, I think the Mac Sierra OS operating system, is so new that Software Secure had a note put up that they can't run that on that new operating system. They have to configure their system in a way. So sometimes that may create some problems on students trying to take their exams. But the main issue, though, is one that I brought up earlier, is that now students aren't as afraid of webcams as before. Now, I would say this is really referring to that 2% that are just determined to figure out a way around and still cheat. Most of your students will be honest and will use the webcam and take the exam honestly, but you always still deal with those few percent that are trying to figure a way around it. And so this really led us to a new partnership with a company called HonorLock. And this is a relatively new company. It was developed just 2 years ago, and many of you may not have even heard of HonorLock. But what HonorLock offers is a key asset in which they call mobile capture. It's mobile capture, which really addresses the idea that if students are hiding a device behind a webcam or anywhere actually, they're able to detect it and provide evidence that that student has that hidden device. Okay? Now, how is that actually done? Well, this is the difficult part because other than the company executives, no one really knows how they do that. Right? But it does work. And what I do know is this: every time, and I've been using HonorLock starting this past summer, and I'm using it this semester. But before each exam, I upload my exam to the HonorLock system. Okay, so they have access to it. And I know for sure what they do from that point is they search the internet for those questions. And when they find those questions, they will usually contact the companies in which those questions sit. Again, they could be Course Hero, it could be Quizlet, Study Blue, and ask them to take them down. Okay, and I get a report saying that all these questions have been taken down from these sources, and most of the time these companies are very willing to take down these questions because they don't want to get in trouble from the publishers for posting copyrighted content. So then there's a second component to this HonorLock software. So they're making a proactive effort to take out the questions online, which is good. But secondly, they also apparently seed the internet with the same questions. Except this time, when students click on that question online, if they're using a hidden device, instead of just receiving the answer, they're also triggering a mechanism that will ultimately capture what they're seeing on their device. Okay? And not only that, it will also capture the device they're using. This is just an example of that. This is a report that I received that a student used a device, and it provided what device it was. It even provided me the IP address. And it showed what the student searched for at that particular moment when the question matched what was seen on the screen with what the actual question was on the test. Okay? And so this is it's really incredible type of situation, because the reason I use HonorLock now is not because I want to catch my students using hidden devices, because what I actually do is before each exam, I explain to my student what the system does. I tell them, be very careful, do not try to hide devices, because this system will capture and you will get caught. And that seems to be a very effective deterrent, because out of 400 students, I used to receive a number of red flags using Software Secure, but in the summer, I would only receive 2. Okay, so the vast majority of my students then agree that yes, this is a very powerful system. I better not try to hide devices and search for answers. But the problem is now that I have these 2 cases that didn't believe me, these 2 students that didn't believe me, and they use hidden devices and they were caught. And so the difficulty now is, as an instructor, trying to explain to students what they did wrong. And it's clear what they did wrong. They used a hidden device, but then you have to explain to them how you got that information from a private device. And that, for me, is sometimes a little uncomfortable. And so that, again, it's one of those trade-offs: is how much do you want to go to enforce academic integrity versus potentially causing some privacy issues, especially with personal devices. And so that's why I'm still at this point now where I'm debating between Software Secure and HonorLock. I like Software Secure's reports, because in Software Secure, what they do, if a student is hiding a device like behind the camera, Software Secure will detect movements that are considered out of the ordinary, like if a student is constantly looking in a certain direction during the exam. And in that case, they will flag it as that's a violation. The part that is difficult with using that evidence is it's not concrete. Okay, because if you accuse a student of simply looking away throughout the exam, they will deny it. Okay, they'll say, like, well, when I'm thinking, I'm always looking that way. And so with students having so many opportunities to appeal an accusation, not often, but sometimes they will actually win their appeal because there is a lack of concrete evidence. So in sum, there's so many types of softwares out there to use, and it really comes down to choosing between how much do you want to protect your exams, and at the other end, you have to think about how much time do you want to invest in this process, how much money does your college or university is able to devote to this, to protecting academic integrity, and also, very importantly, the issue of privacy, to consider what extent do you feel that students' privacy should be protected. Okay? But for all universities that are pursuing an increase in online courses, including ours, proctoring is really seen as a necessity. And so for that reason, we will continue to look at the resources and technologies available and try to come up with the best balance between academic integrity and convenience and privacy. So thank you.